Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the August Schmorg. It is such a pleasure to have you all here, to see all of your shining faces, to see old friends and new friends, and it almost makes me feel like we're getting back to what it was like BC, before Corona. So it's really good to see everybody here. The buffet is still open. Just because the program has started, you can still refill your plate. As my father always says, seconds are encouraged, thirds are admired. So feel free, if you want a little bit more to eat, grab something, and dessert will, as always, be served afterwards. So just a quick public service announcement for an upcoming event. You might have noticed in the center of your table, there's some cards with a fine-looking young man on it. That's Rabbi Aryeh Lightstone. And Rabbi Lightstone will be here in Cleveland next week. Rabbi Lightstone was the senior advisor to Ambassador David Friedman in the last administration and was one of the key architects of the Abraham Accords and the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. And he was literally on the one on the ground in Israel representing America for all of those moves. And he just put out a new fascinating book called Let My People Know. And he will be here next Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m., and we'll have a conversation about that new book. It is going to be a fascinating event. It won't be a Schmorg menu. It'll just be refreshments, so I'm sorry about that. But it will be refreshments because it's a Jewish event, so no matter what the Jewish event is, you have to have refreshments. So that'll be next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. If you can please join us, tell your friends, tell your enemies. It will be a fascinating event. He did a program for us last year with some of our board members and our donors, and everyone's just blown away by him. So it is not to be missed. Please join us again next week if you're not sick of us yet. With no further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. She is a lady who needs absolutely no introduction, but I'm a rabbi and I like to talk, so I'll introduce her anyways. I was recently at a rabbinical conference in the great city of Atlanta, Georgia, and I was together with my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Ruchi Koval, and somebody comes up to Rabbi Koval and says to him, "You must know what it feels like to be Rabbi Youngrice." Now, to explain that comment, there was a very famous speaker, public speaker, motivational speaker who passed away a number of years ago named Rebbetzin Esther Youngrice. And she had these really small venues. Like she spoke once for the Republican National Convention, and she would speak in front of thousands and thousands of people. So in that comparison, we can understand the treat that we are in for to hear Mrs. Ruchi Koval, who is the Associate Director of JFX, our wonderful host for our Tuesday night programs. And she is a sought-out speaker in the Jewish world. She inspires audiences all over, both as a momentum leader, as the Associate Director of JFX, and just as a speaker and author and many other good things. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Mrs. Ruchi Koval.
How do we get this? I don't like being tied down. I think it just unclips, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I do not like being tied down. I am a Jew. I move when I talk. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's great to be here. Great crowd tonight. 10 years ago, I was driving from Niagara Falls to Cleveland with a couple of my kids in tow without my husband. And I had to stop off at a rest stop. Somebody was a baby, I don't remember who. One of my kids I'm talking about, but I don't remember which one. And some kids had to go to the bathroom, and some kids had to eat, and the baby needed a bottle. And I'm like herding these probably 4 or 5 of my kids into this rest stop in like Hickstown in upstate New York without my husband. My boys were wearing kippahs, so we were obviously Jewish. And I was trying to figure out like how to multitask and get everything done and keep everybody safe and, make sure that nobody did anything untoward when I wasn't looking. So I finally got everybody situated and settled, and I'm sitting at the table feeding my baby a bottle, and there are my little boys in their kippahs eating their lunch. When the door opens to the rest stop, and in walks these 2 tall guys with piercings and chains and tattoos and long hair and they start walking towards my table. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids are wearing kippas. Who are these guys? They look kind of threatening. Should I take off their kippas? And I'm just like kind of starting to sweat, and I don't know what's going to be. Who are these people? What do they want from me? I'm looking around, where's the exit? And these guys come over to my table, and they look at me, and they say, Eifo ha'aba? Where's the dad? In Hebrew. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're my people. I'm not scared of you. Piercings, tattoos, chains, who cares? You're my peeps, Turns out that was the only Hebrew they knew. They sat down at my table and we started talking, and they were telling me that they had been to Israel for their bar mitzvahs, and they jumped off cliffs and I don't know what else, and they really wanted to get back to Israel. And I told them that I lived in Israel for 5 years, and they thought that was the coolest thing, and they left and I left. And the reason this story stayed with me is because it really drove home to me this feeling that we have, or at least that I have, when I see a fellow Jew. A fellow Jew is my people. And it doesn't matter if I know them, if I like them. It doesn't even matter if we agree, because if it's a fellow Jew, we probably don't. But it means that these are my people, and this is my family. So we're here in this period of time on the Jewish calendar called the 9 days. It's a very creative name. It describes 9 days. And what's unique about these days, as many of you might know, is that these are the 9 days leading up to the day called Tisha B'Av. My little daughter, who's now 12 years old, she used to call it tissue bug before she understood. Tisha B'Av means the 9th day of the Hebrew month called Av. We're in the month of Av right now. And on the 9th day of Av, the two temples in different years, about 500 years apart, were destroyed. The first one by the Babylonians, the second one by the Romans. And many other tragedies happened on the Jewish calendar on this day. So in these 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av, it's a period of semi-mourning on the Jewish calendar. We do not have Jewish weddings. Many people don't listen to music. Many people refrain from meat and wine, unless you're Sephardi, in which case I want to be Sephardi too. But part of the energy of these 9 days is a real focus on the root of the destruction of the temple. And the root of the destruction of the temple is that the Talmud tells us why the temple was destroyed. The Talmud tells us that the reason the temple was destroyed was because of sinat chinam, which means free hate. Free hate. I'll hate you because why not? Because you're different from me. Because you look different. Because you think different. Because you practice differently. Because you vote differently. Because you are different. So I'll just hate you. Why not? It's free. And the Talmud says that that's why the temple was destroyed, because of the fracture, because of the disintegration of the societal unit, because of the dissolvement of the family unit. That's why the temple was destroyed. Rabbi Landis mentioned that I'm a leader for Momentum. Momentum is an organization, it's like a birthright for moms. And it's an organization that takes Jewish mothers to Israel on an incredible journey. One of the things we do when we go to Israel, a very iconic thing to do when you go to Israel, is you visit Masada. Anybody here been to Masada? So I have to confess, and I probably shouldn't say this as a representative of an organization that takes people to Israel, I hate Masada. And not just because it's 107 degrees in July, which is when I usually go to Israel, and yes, I checked, 107, but because the story of Masada is one of the most tragic stories in Jewish history. It's become a symbol of Jewish resistance against the enemy, but what it's really a story about is the factionalization of Jews who were both threatened by the Romans, and one group said, let's resist and fight, and the other group said, let's surrender and live. And these two groups were so opposed to one another that it was a civil war, And one group burned down all the storehouses of the other group, so they had to capitulate to the Romans. And in order to survive, they climbed all the way to the top of Masada. They survived there for only 3 years. I often ask groups, how long do you think the Jews were at the top of Masada? It ranges from 500 years to 100 years. 3 years they were at the top of Masada until they all killed each other and died instead of being captured by either the Romans or their fellow Jews. That's a terrible place to visit. That describes how bad was the breakdown of society during the time of the temple era. Masada is not a place to be celebrated. It's a time to cry. It's a place to cry. But this is not really about Masada. This is about the breakdown of society. So the rabbis say, well, if that's what happened during the temple era, that Jews were so opposed to one another, then how do we repair what was broken? How do we repair the damage? The way we repair the damage of free hate is with, to borrow a phrase, free love. Ahavat chinam. If I'm not sure how to feel about you, I'll feel love. If I'm not sure if I like you, I'll choose like. If I'm not sure how I feel about you, I'll find something to adore, to respect, to connect. So that's the period of time that we're in right now. We're in the period of time where we're supposed to be focusing on ahavat chinam, on thinking the best about a fellow Jew. The word shalom, which means peace, right? One of the most iconic words in Judaism. If you know one Hebrew word, it's probably going to be shalom, right? I was once in an airport, and I was wearing a scarf covering my hair, and I guess somebody realized that I was Jewish, and this person came over to me. You know when someone tries to bagel you? You guys familiar with that term? Like someone tries to show you that they're Jewish, they bagel you. So this guy comes over to me, he's just like standing near me, and he finally leans over and he says, Shalom. I'm like, Shalom. I see you, member of the tribe. You see me. I've just been bageled. Okay? That's the word. The word is shalom. And the reason it's such an iconic word in Judaism is because peace is one of the most important values in Judaism. To have peace. To be at peace. To have peace within yourself. To have peace between us and God. To have peace with us and our fellow Jews. In fact, the one prayer that's repeated over and over and over again in the prayer service is the Kaddish, right? The end of every single Kaddish, not every single Kaddish is identical, but the end of every single Kaddish is identical, and here's how it ends. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen, which means, may the God who has made peace in heaven, may he make peace on us and on all of Israel, and may we say amen. And we repeat that prayer over and over and over again. God makes peace in heaven. What that means is there's the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets and the galaxies and all these different things swirling around. You would think that there would be regular disaster up there, but it's not. It's a very well-run world. And the reason for that is that God makes peace in heaven. And God takes all these opposing forces and all these opposing elements, and God created a beautifully synchronized and organized universe. And so we say to God, if you could do that up there, then there's hope for us. There's hope for humanity, because we're also so different. And we also have so many different ideas. And ironically, the more similar we are, the more we'll notice our differences. That's what's called the narcissism of small differences. You have this kind of Reform congregation and that kind of Reform congregation. This kind of Orthodox synagogue and that kind of Orthodox synagogue. I'm modern Orthodox light. I'm regular Orthodox. I'm Hasidic Orthodox. I'm Chabad Orthodox. How many flavors? It's like Baskin Robbins. Because we divide ourselves and further divide ourselves. So we talk about shalom, peace, right? The word shalom is related to the word shalem. The word shalem means whole. Now, we don't say that something is whole unless it has the possibility to be fractured and broken, right? I don't look at an apple and say, wow, this apple is whole, if it was never cut up or divided, right? But I'll look at a jigsaw puzzle and say, wow, this jigsaw puzzle is whole because it was in a million pieces and somebody put those million pieces together and now is whole. So shalom means that there is a connectivity between fractured things. One of the mottos of Momentum, this organization that I work for, is unity without uniformity. Many people think that unity means being the same. Let's be of the same mind. Let's agree. That's not what shalom is. That's not what unity is. Unity and peace means we are connected even though we disagree, even though we're different, even though there's potential for fracture and brokenness, we're still one, we're still together. That's the accomplishment. There's no achievement in being at one with the people who agree with you. My husband and I have been blessed with 7 kids and 2 kids-in-law, thank God. One of my 7 children is like me. The other 6 are not very much like me. That's okay. They're okay anyways. But this particular daughter happens to be very much like me. We are alike. We think alike. We talk alike. We look alike. So one time, very often we open our mouth and literally the same thing comes out. In fact, a couple of times we're sitting around the Shabbat table and we're having a conversation and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I should really say X, but I'm chewing, and I think to myself, that's okay, she's about to say it. And she does. She opens her mouth and like my words come out of her mouth. It's weird and also very nice. So she and I went on vacation together once to Chicago, and we're in the hotel room and I see that we both unpacked right when we got there because that's what we do. She lines up her shoes, I line up my shoes. She takes off her jewelry and puts them right here on the counter. I take off my jewelry and put it right there on the counter. We set our alarms for the same time. We like to eat the same things. We both have the same ideas at the same time. I'm like, this is too easy. I'm on vacation with myself. And that's fun, and that's great. There's no achievement in that. There's no achievement in getting along with someone who is just like you. The achievement of peace and of unity is in getting along with people who are not like you. How many of you read the Cleveland Jewish News? How many of you read my column in the Cleveland Jewish News? Excellent, thank you. So in my recent column in the Cleveland Jewish News, so if you already know the answer to this question, I posed the following question. What are the Jewish people? If you had to come up with one word that describes what we are, what would it be? We're a family. Anything else? We're a community. Anything else? What? We're survivors. Anything else? Family. Another vote for family. Anything else? So some of the answers that have been suggested, I remember when I was in seminary, my year in Israel right after high school, one of my teachers posed this question to us. Are we a religion? Are we a nation? Are we a race? Are we an ethnicity? And we all debated this question, right? The truth is that the Jewish people have defied categorization. We don't really fit neatly into any box. In many ways, we're not a nation because if you look back at thousands of years of history, we've ended up in many different communities, many different countries, many different ethnicities, many different customs. We're not really a religion because you could be completely a-religious and atheistic and a non-believer, you would still be a Jew. I've had people tell me over the years, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I never heard anybody say, I'm a lapsed Jew. No, you're just a Jew feeling guilty. You can't ever stop being Jewish, right? So really the best summarization of what we are, I would agree that we are a family. What does that mean that we're a family? It means we belong together, yes, because we're related. And if you go back enough generations, right, we come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But just as families can welcome new members who are not born in, right, we have 2 children-in-law, they're lovely. So too in Judaism, we also can welcome those who come in, who have converted to Judaism, who were not born in, and they're still just as much a part of the family. And just as with family, right, it's like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never check out. So once you're in our family, the door is locked. You can't leave, right? And besides for that, what else defines a family? I once saw this great meme. Family. I will donate my kidney, but I will never give you my phone charger. Now, my husband's standing in the back of the room, and he thinks that's very funny because I am not good at sharing my phone charger. But I would give you a kidney. You know that. So what does that mean? It means that as a family, we love each other. We don't always like each other. It means we might bicker and squabble mercilessly. But if we're facing a common threat, you better believe that I will defend my fellow Jewish brother or sister till the end. And here in Cleveland, the truth is, if you look around at the Jewish community, we all do look pretty similar. We're generally speaking a white, short bunch of people. But if you go to Israel, you'll see that Jews come in all shapes and colors and sizes, right? So we are so diverse and we're so mixed. And the Jewish world goes from all the way to the left politically, don't listen, Rabbi Landis, and all the way to the right politically, right? Just as in a family. In my family, we have people with very diverse views. That doesn't mean that we don't love each other. That doesn't mean that we don't stick together. Sometimes it means that we agree not to talk about certain things because it's just better for the sake of peace, right? But we're family. We're mishpacha. That's how I felt when those guys walked into the rest stop. Mishpacha, you're my people. You're my brother. You're both my brothers. I would do anything for you. And if anybody threatened those guys, you can better be sure that I would be the first to stand up for them. And that's what I would encourage you to think about, especially during this 9-day period when we're supposed to be focusing on repairing the brokenness that destroyed the temple, is to figure out how to come together and be one. So I would like to ask you, how can we really take practical steps, because I always try to give practical steps. How can we give practical steps to come to a greater sense of unity? The Hebrew word for unity is achdut, or achdus, in Ashkenazis, tomato. It comes from the word echad, one. Achdut means oneness. What does oneness mean? The Torah tells us that the 12 tribes were united. Yachad Shivtei Yisrael. The 12 tribes were united. Yachad, which is a very worthy organization, by the way, comes from the word echad as well, a sense of connectedness. Now, if you go through the Torah, you'll see that the 12 tribes were very different. There were those who were very impulsive. There were those who were very spiritual. There were those who were businessmen. There were those who studied Torah. There were those who were very wealthy. They had all different personalities. And yet, they were facing a common focal point. That's our goal. Our goal is to say, imagine the world as a circle, right? And God is at the epicenter, right? Then there's different radii to the center. Or there's different paths up the mountain, so to speak. We don't have to be the same. We don't even have to be facing in the same direction, but we're still one. We're still connected. So how can we do this in real life? Because as we know, it can be very hard to feel connectedness and oneness and unity with people who really drive us crazy and with people with whom we radically disagree. So I'd like to offer you a few strategies for how to come to that place of oneness, particularly when you're feeling fractured with another person. So step one is something called giving the benefit of the doubt. And it's a very important strategy. And it's actually a very self-serving strategy because the Torah tells us that if we will give other people the benefit of the doubt, then God will give us the benefit of the doubt. Now, we all have things that we do that we would rather God not pay so much attention to, right? I remember when my brother was a little boy, we were all in the kitchen, and he's outside in the backyard doing something, and he runs in the kitchen, and he said, "Mommy, don't look." And then he runs back outside. So, of course, my mother goes to the window. She's like, what is he doing out there? No, he's probably digging up the backyard. So there are times that we do certain things, and we're like, God, could you go get busy with something else for a minute? Because just don't look, So God tells us, you know what? If you don't look so hard at what everybody else is doing, you stop scrutinizing everybody else's mistakes, then guess what? I'll stop scrutinizing your mistakes. It's even Steven. That's how God runs the world. So one strategy then is to give other people the benefit of the doubt the way we would want God to give us the benefit of the doubt. And it's very interesting because Rosh Hashanah is basically 7 weeks away. I don't mean to scare you, right? But we all want to be able to stand before God on Rosh Hashanah and say, you know what, God? I really tried to look with benevolence on other people's mistakes. So then God will say, and I will look with benevolence on your mistakes. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy is something that I learned from my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was known as Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. And he was one of the Hasidic masters. And what he was known for, he was called the great defender of Israel. He would look at the Jewish people, at whatever they were doing, and he would find some way to look at that behavior with benevolence. And then he would turn to God and say, God, look at your amazing people. Look how special they are. Look how incredible they are. And he would mine every situation for the good. So let's say that we see somebody who is, let's say, a prominent member of the community, right? And they're doing something really bad, right? And so our first reaction is to say, what's the matter with you? You hold yourself up as a leader and you're doing something really bad? Okay? So now, imagine saying to yourself, you know what, God? Look how even your great leaders can sin, and yet, God, you still forgive. We see in the Torah, the Jews did some pretty awful things. 40 days after receiving the Torah, after receiving the 10 Commandments, they're dancing around a golden calf because they thought Moses wasn't coming down the mountain anymore. And it was a very serious breach in their faith, but at the end of the day, God did forgive them. So we can look at that situation and say, wow, isn't this amazing? Even the greatest leaders can sin, and they can still be forgiven. Isn't that amazing? There's always room for redemption. People can always come back. People can always do better. And we can use it as an opportunity to see the good. It can help us feel less bad about the mistakes that we make, because everybody makes mistakes. And in the Torah, we do not whitewash the mistakes of our heroes. The Torah describes the mistakes of our heroes because we can even learn from the mistakes of our heroes. So whereas Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, he would look at people and see the good. He would see the good in what they were doing. We too can learn to see the good in what other people are doing. So it's not just about looking away from another person's mistakes. It's about learning from another person's mistakes. And the third strategy that I'd like to share with you is something that I kind of call benign neglect. I remember when I was a teenager, and a friend of mine and I were biking outside in Cleveland Heights, where I grew up, and my friend said to me, you know, there are certain things that my mother sees me do, and she pretends she didn't see. And I said to her, that's crazy talk. Parents don't do that. Parents don't ignore what you did wrong. They react to what you did wrong. And she said, no, I'm telling you. They pretend they didn't see certain things. And I said, well, why would they do that? And she said, I don't know why, but I'm telling you, they do that. So I filed this information away for later, and I'm here to tell you that she's right. Parents do sometimes pretend not to see. You know why? Because good parents don't want to catch their kids doing everything wrong. We would prefer to catch our kids doing something right. And so what if we were to apply that strategy to other people? Yeah, I did see that social media post. Yeah, I did hear that comment. Yeah, I did notice that breach of behavior, but maybe I could just pretend not to see it. Because you know what? Every person also has so much good, and every person also does so much good. And this is actually one of the huge dangers of social media, is that we see tiny fractions of a person's life, and it becomes so magnified because we don't know those people, and so we define them by those tiny fractions. And this is why people get into arguments with strangers on Facebook. That is not the best way to change the world. So the beauty of knowing a person, a whole person, not just a little tiny slice of them, but who they really are, is where we say to ourselves, I'm going to take this misdeed, this annoying opinion, or this bad or wrong way of being, and I'm going to fade that into the background. I'm going to blur it. And instead, I'm going to bring to the foreground, into sharp focus, the things I like about them, the things that they are doing right. Because you know what? I don't have to notice every misdeed. And one day, if I go up to heaven and God says to me, you saw that person doing something wrong, you should have gotten angry, I will be very proud to say, God, I was trying to be less angry, not more angry. And I think God will be very proud of me. So these are a few strategies for how to create more connectedness, more feeling like family, more oneness, more shalom. And I would even challenge you to consider that the person who is the least likely for you to have shalom with is the person you should be thinking about the most. In what way can I have some point of connection with this person to create a less fractured world? I'd like to conclude with a story. There was once a guy whose daughter was getting married. So some of you may know that Jewish weddings are very expensive. Those of you are people whose kids have gotten married. And except for our son, who got married 2 years ago during COVID in our backyard, and there were 20 people there, and we are actually going to appear in the Guinness Book of World Records for cheapest Jewish wedding ever. So in any case, this man was saving up money for his daughter's wedding, and don't try this at home, he was saving it up in cash. So his friend says to him, you know, my daughter's getting married, and I need a loan. I'll pay you back, we'll make the terms, this and that, but my daughter's getting married, and I could really use a loan of $20,000. So this guy thinks to himself, I mean, I have the cash, and I have time. I don't need to use it yet. So probably I should lend him the money, right? Okay. I don't know how much you guys are squirming right now, but I wouldn't do it, okay? I'm not such a good person. My husband would do it. He would lend him the money. So this guy is considering, what should he do? It's a hard thing to do, to lend the money. You don't really ever know if you're going to get it back. But he finally landed at, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this mitzvah. This is a fellow Jew. This is my family. This is my mishpacha. I'm going to do it. I'm going to lend him the money. So where is he storing this money? In the basement, in a jacket pocket. Okay, you guys know how the story is going to end. So he goes downstairs to the basement, to the jacket pocket, and he opens the pocket. No, he goes downstairs, and the jacket is gone. He looks high and low for the jacket. He can't see it anywhere. He can't find it anywhere. He's freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. So he goes and tells his wife. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall during that particular conversation. And they're trying to figure out what to do. Did you see it? Did you move it? I didn't see it. I didn't move it. Why are you keeping cash in a pocket, in a jacket? There are things called banks. Fine. They have this whole conversation. Who was in the basement last? And they figure out that their housekeeper was in the basement last. So they call up the housekeeper and they say, listen, We're totally not accusing you. We're just curious. Did you happen to move the jacket? So she says, yeah, actually, I saw that jacket's been down there forever. Nobody's moved it and nobody's touched it. I threw it away. He says, when did you throw it away? She says, yesterday. He says, oh my gosh, tomorrow is garbage day. Runs outside to the garbage cans, goes dumpster diving through all the junk, and lo and behold, he finds the jacket. You can all breathe now. So what does he come to realize? If he would not have said yes to do an act of kindness for a fellow Jew, an act of connectedness, an act of unity, that jacket would now be in the city dump. Because he wouldn't have gone downstairs that day, and he wouldn't have looked for the money, and he wouldn't have known that the jacket was missing, and he wouldn't have asked the housekeeper, and the housekeeper wouldn't have told him where it was, and it would be gone. So here he thought he was doing a favor for somebody else. And what was God showing him? When you act with love and connectedness and unity, you know who benefits the most? You do. Because there is nothing in the world that feels as good as being part of a connected, interconnected, interdependent team. And that's what the Jews are. We are team Jews. So get on the team, be a team player, take one for the team, do something good for the team. And that's how, God willing, we will repair a broken world. Thank you.